Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Wednesday, September 24th, 2025. A gunman kills 2 detainees at an ICE facility in Dallas, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And what the FBI Director Kash Patel says looks like a politically motivated attack. Senator Ted Cruz, Republican of Texas, says of this and other recent attacks, this violence is wrong and needs to stop. ABC late-night talk show host Jimmy Kimmel returns to the airwaves after being suspended over comments he made about conservative activist Charlie Kirk's murder, and his monologue gets tens of millions of views online. Former President Bill Clinton talks about the importance of freedom of speech and freedom of the press at the Clinton Global Initiative Conference in New York City, and warns partisan disagreements have become so deep they are threatening the country as a whole. Democrat Adelita Grijalva wins a special election for the U.S. House seat held by her late father until his death earlier this year in Arizona. Ben Carson, former HUD secretary, takes a job as National Nutrition Advisor in the Trump administration. NASA astronauts going to the moon in early 2026 talk about their mission. And the presidents of Ukraine and Iran speak at the United Nations General Assembly. Associated Press reporting from Dallas, a shooter with a rifle opened fire from a nearby roof onto an U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement location in Dallas on Wednesday, killing 2 detainees and wounding another before taking his own life, authorities said. The suspect has been identified by a law enforcement official as 29-year-old Joshua John. The official could not publicly disclose details of the investigation and spoke to the AP on condition of anonymity. The exact motivation for the attack was not immediately known. The head of the FBI, Kash Patel, released a photo on social media that shows a bullet found at the scene with the words anti-ICE written in what appears to be marker. The attack is the latest public targeted killing in the U.S. and comes 2 weeks after conservative leader Charlie Kirk was killed by a rifle-wielding shooter on a roof. That was from Associated Press. At a Dallas news conference, Joseph Rothrock, FBI Dallas Field Office Special Agent in Charge, spoke about what is known so far.
What I can also share with you is that early evidence that we've seen from rounds that were found near the suspected shooter contain messages that are anti-ICE in nature. Again, this is just the most recent example of this type of attack. This will be a whole of government response. There will be no resource not utilized to bring all those individuals who are responsible to bring them to justice and to hold them accountable. While we're not releasing identities of any victims at this time, what I can confirm for you is no members of law enforcement were hurt during this attack. If any member of the public has information that would help the FBI's investigation, I would ask that you please report that to 1-800-CALL-FBI. Again, any piece of information will be helpful, but this will be an ongoing investigation between us, a number of federal partners, and our local partners, again, to ensure that anyone responsible is held accountable.
Joseph Rothrock, FBI Dallas Field Office Special Agent in Charge, at an early morning news conference in Dallas. The Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem writing on X for months, we've been warning politicians and the media to tone down their rhetoric about ICE law enforcement before someone was killed. These horrendous killings must serve as a wake-up call to the far left that their rhetoric about ICE has consequences. The Dallas news conference also included the police chief, the mayor, and U.S. Senator Ted Cruz, Republican of Texas.
This needs to stop. Violence is wrong. Politically motivated violence is wrong. It was 2 weeks ago today that we saw a political assassination in Utah that tore the heart out of much of this country. This is the third shooting in Texas directed at ICE or CBP. This must stop. To every politician who is using rhetoric demonizing ICE and demonizing CBP, stop. To every politician demanding that ICE agents be doxxed and calling for people to go after their families, stop. This has very real consequences. Look, in America, we disagree. That's fine. That's the democratic process. But your political opponents are not Nazis. We need to learn to work together without demonizing each other, without attacking each other. And I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to the brave men and women of law enforcement. I want to say thank you to the brave men and women of ICE and CBP and everyone who puts their lives on the line to keep us safe. The divisive rhetoric tragically has real consequences. I hope that every one of us will pray, number one, for the safety of law enforcement that are risking their lives to keep us safe. Number two, for the health of those who were shot and injured today. We still don't know the full details of who was injured, but for the families also of the victims of this shooting. Violence has no place. It is wrong. And we should come together. If we want to have a debate about immigration policies, we can do so in the halls of Congress without demonizing each other, and especially without demonizing the men and women who every day put on a badge and go risk their lives to keep us safe. And we should not be putting language out there that inspires madmen to commit evil crimes.
Senator Ted Cruz, Republican of Texas, at a morning news conference in Dallas after the shooting. Senator Tammy Baldwin, Democrat from Wisconsin, posting online, "We cannot allow this kind of violence to become the norm in this country. It's on all of us to condemn these actions. While we wait to learn more about this tragic shooting, my thoughts are with the victims, the Dallas community, and the first responders on the scene." FBI Director Kash Patel writing on X about the shooting, "These despicable, politically motivated attacks against law enforcement are not a one-off. We are only miles from Prairieland, Texas, where just 2 months ago an individual ambushed a separate ICE facility targeting their officers. It has to end, and the FBI and our partners will lead these investigative efforts to see to it that those who target our law enforcement are pursued and brought to the fullest extent of justice." That was from the FBI Director Kash Patel. Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, the House Minority Leader, spoke about the shooting as he opened a news conference in Washington.
Let me begin by expressing our heartfelt condolences, prayers, and sympathies to the families of the victims of the shooting that occurred earlier today at the ICE facility in Dallas. We're also very thankful and appreciative of the first responders who showed up on the scene, raced toward danger, and secured the situation to prevent any further carnage. The level of political violence and ideologically motivated violence across the spectrum is far too high in the United States of America right now. We need leadership that brings people together, not national leadership that tears people apart.
Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, the House Minority Leader, holding a news conference in Washington, D.C. Vice President J.D. Vance was in Concord, North Carolina today talking about public safety provisions in the budget reconciliation bill signed into law this year, the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill, or the Working Families Tax Cut Bill, as the White House has been calling it lately. The vice president spoke about the shooting at the ICE facility in Dallas, Texas.
I said Charlie Kirk's assassination was the most political and disgusting violence that we've had in this country in the last couple of weeks. And that was true maybe until this morning, because I don't know if you all have followed the news, and we're still learning a little bit about it. But what we know is that in Dallas, Texas, an ICE facility, an Immigrations and Customs Enforcement facility, was opened fire upon by a violent left-wing extremist, a person who wrote anti-ICE messaging on their bullets. And there's some evidence that we have that's not yet public, but we know this person was politically motivated. They were politically motivated to go after law enforcement. They were politically motivated to go after people who are enforcing our border. And I think that is the most disgusting thing. The very people who keep us safe ought to be honored and protected and praised by Democrats and Republicans alike. It is time to stop the rhetorical assault on law enforcement. Because here's what happens. Because here's what happens when Democrats like Gavin Newsom did say that these people are part of an authoritarian government. when the left-wing media lies about what they're doing, when they lie about who they're arresting, when they lie about the actual job of law enforcement, what they're doing is encouraging crazy people to go and commit violence. You don't have to agree with my immigration policies. You don't have to agree with Donald Trump's immigration policies. But if your political rhetoric encourages violence against our law enforcement, you can go straight to hell, and you have no place in the political conversation of the United States of America.
Vice President J.D. Vance speaking in Concord, North Carolina today. President Donald Trump writing on Truth Social a lengthy post about today's deadly shooting at the ICE facility in Dallas, Texas. It begins, I've been briefed on the deadly shooting at the field office in Dallas, Texas. It has now been revealed the deranged shooter wrote anti-ICE on his shell casings. This is despicable. The brave men and women of ICE are just trying to do their jobs, remove the worst of the worst criminals out of our country, but they're facing an unprecedented increase in threats, violence, and attacks by deranged radical leftists. This violence is a result of the radical left Democrats constantly demonizing law enforcement, calling for ICE to be demolished, and comparing ICE officers to Nazis. The continuing violence from radical left terrorists and the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's assassination must be stopped. Part of a long post from President Donald Trump. It's a story from the LA Times. The family of a Mexican national and former DACA recipient expressed sadness and outrage after he died in federal immigration custody. Ismael Ayala Uribe, 39 years old, was pronounced dead Sunday at Victor Valley Global Medical Center, according to a statement from ICE. Ayala Uribe had received protection from deportation under the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program in 2012, but his application for renewal was denied 4 years later. He is the 14th person to die in immigration detention since January, when federal immigration officials began to carry out President Trump's mass deportation agenda. Reporting from the LA Times. This is Washington Today. The monologue Jimmy Kimmel delivered on his return to late-night television, begins a Reuters article, had been seen nearly 19 million times on Google's YouTube and Meta's Instagram by early Wednesday afternoon. Kimmel's Tuesday night monologue had 13.3 million views on YouTube, 5.6 million on Instagram. Broadcast ratings for Tuesday's show were not yet available. Kimmel's return to the air 6 days after his remarks about the murder of right-wing activist Charlie Kirk led Disney to suspend his show under pressure from President Donald Trump's administration. Disney initially said some of Kimmel's remarks were ill-timed and insensitive. Reporting from Reuters, here's part of Jimmy Kimmel's monologue opening his show, Jimmy Kimmel Live, on ABC Tuesday night.
You understand that it was never my intention to make light of the murder of a young man. I don't think there's anything funny about it. I posted a message on Instagram on the day he was killed, sending love to his family and asking for compassion, and I meant it, and I still do. Nor was it my intention to blame any specific group for the actions of what it was obviously a deeply disturbed individual. That was really the opposite of the point I was trying to make, but I understand that to some that felt either ill-timed or unclear, or maybe both. And for those who think I did point a finger, I get why you're upset. If the situation was reversed, there's a good chance I'd have felt the same way. I have many friends and family members on the other side who I love and remain close to, even though we don't agree on politics at all. I don't think the murderer who shot Charlie Kirk represents anyone. This was a sick person who believed violence was a solution, and it isn't. Ever. And also, selfishly, I am a person who gets a lot of threats. I get many ugly and scary threats against my life, my wife, my kids, my coworkers because of what I choose to say. And I know those threats don't come from the kind of people on the right who I know and love. So that's what I wanted to say on that subject. But I don't want to make this about me because, and I know this is what people say when they make things about them, but I really don't. This show is not important. What is important is that we get to live in a country that allows us to have a show like this. Yeah! I've had had the opportunity to meet and spend time with comedians and talk show hosts from countries like Russia, countries in the Middle East, who tell me they would get thrown in prison for making fun of those in power, and worse than being thrown in prison. They know how lucky we are here. Our freedom to speak is what they admire most about this country.
Talk show host Jimmy Kimmel on ABC Tuesday night, a program that was not seen by the 25% of ABC TV affiliates around the country owned by Nexstar and Sinclair, which decided not to air the program when Disney reinstated the host. Andrew Colvett, spokesperson for Turning Point USA, which was the late Charlie Kirk's organization. He co-founded it, posting on X today, yes, Jimmy got emotional, so what? He's emotional for himself because he almost torched his entire career. Kimmel is an unrepentant liar who tried to blame Charlie's assassination on the part of the country that just spent the last 2 weeks praying and holding vigils. What he's really saying is that he still thinks it's fair game to slander conservatives. He would rather advance his own political and cultural agenda than confront the truth. The truth is that his own side has been fanning the flames of political assassinations for years. Part of the post by the spokesperson for Turning Point USA, Andrew Colvett. President Donald Trump threatened to sue ABC over the return of Jimmy Kimmel to air, writing on Truth Social Tuesday night. Why would they want someone back who does so poorly, who's not funny, and who puts the network in jeopardy by playing 99% positive Democrat garbage? He is yet another arm of the DNC, and to the best of my knowledge, that would be a major illegal campaign contribution. I think we're going to test ABC out on this. Let's see how we do. Last time I went after them, they gave me $16 million. This one sounds even more lucrative. A true bunch of losers. Let Jimmy Kimmel rot in his bad ratings. Part of the post from President Trump Tuesday night. Former President Bill Clinton, writes Spectrum News on Wednesday, called on Americans to find common ground and see each other as people again in an era of increasing partisanship and dehumanizing speech. During the kickoff to the 20th gathering of his Clinton Global Initiative on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly in New York, Clinton said partisan disagreements have become so deep that they are poisoning U.S. politics and threatening the country as a whole. I'm worried because we're pulling further and further away from one another, Clinton said, citing the rise in political violence, including the killings of conservative activist Charlie Kirk this month and a Minnesota lawmaker and her husband earlier this year. That was from Spectrum News. Here's former President Bill Clinton.
I'm worried that we're at risk of losing our freedom of speech and that the weight of the government is being used to restrict expression from journalism to comedy. Look, no politician likes the press on bad days. Thomas Jefferson once said that if he had to choose between a government and a free press, he would without hesitation choose to keep the free press and lose the government. Every time somebody tells me that story, I remind them that he said that before he became president. But the press is supposed to be tough on us, facing hard questions and being forced to think them through and answer them makes our ideas stronger and our politics better. And if the coverage is unfair and inaccurate, we can stand up and do that and point it out and express our disagreements without trying to put people who are doing their jobs under the Constitution out of business. That's wrong. And you don't build strong societies by doing this. It's an illusion. It causes societies to fail when their institutions are all discredited.
Former President Bill Clinton at the Clinton Global Initiative 20th Anniversary Conference in New York City. After his speech, he had a conversation with California Governor Gavin Newsom, a Democrat, about climate change, renewable energy, wildfire and more. You can find the full video at our website, cspan.org. From the Hill, President Trump and GOP lawmakers are itching to make a potential government shutdown as painful as possible for Democrats as negotiations show few signs of progress with less than a week to go before the deadline. Republicans and Democrats have talked past each other for weeks, with each side refusing to pivot from their calls for a 7-week clean stopgap package and for protecting Affordable Care Act subsidies, respectively. But with the high-stakes deadline approaching, Republicans are warning members of the minority party that if a shutdown comes to pass, Trump will make life incredibly difficult for them. That was from The Hill. The end of the fiscal year is September 30th, next week. The Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican of South Dakota, was on CNN today, asked if he advised President Trump to cancel a meeting with the Senate and House Democratic leaders.
And if the Senate does not pass a bill to fund the government in 6 days, the government will shut down. President Trump canceled a planned meeting with Democratic leaders, and CNN is reporting that he made that decision after speaking with you and House Speaker Mike Johnson. Did you encourage the president to cancel his meeting with Democrats?
Well, I think the president, I can't speak for the president. The president draws his own conclusions, but what I would suggest, and I think the president came to the conclusion that it wouldn't be a productive meeting. The Democrats' requests are completely unhinged and unreasonable and unserious. And if they want to have a serious conversation, I think that, I'm sure the president would be welcome or would be happy to do that. At least right now, what they're asking for to keep the government open for 7 weeks is over $1 trillion in new spending and all kinds of policy riders that never go on continuing resolutions. Continuing resolution is something that when the Democrats had the majority and Joe Biden was in the White House, they passed 13 times, and Republicans worked with them to deliver the votes. Those are clean spending, continuing resolutions to fund the government for a foreseeable time in order to allow something else to happen. And in this case, we're trying to do this to allow the normal appropriations process to get underway so that we can pass bills the old-fashioned way, which is through the Appropriations Committee on the floor in the Senate, where every senator has an opportunity to make their voices heard. So this is a short-term extension of existing funding, current funding. The Democrats are trying to hijack it to get $1 trillion in new spending, and I don't think that's a very good deal for the American taxpayer, and it appears, at least at this point, the president's come to the same conclusion.
The Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican of South Dakota, today on CNN. The House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, held a news conference on Capitol Hill in Washington, talking about the potential for a government shutdown.
At this point, with no talk scheduled, do you just anticipate this to be on a cruise control toward a government shutdown?
Republicans have clearly demonstrated they want to shut the government down. Throughout this process, an intentional decision was made by Republican leadership in the House and the Senate not to have a single conversation with Democrats. They're not even pretending as if they want to find common ground. Donald Trump agrees to our demand on Saturday to hold a meeting in the Oval Office to try to avert a government shutdown. The meeting is set on Monday for later on in the week. And then Donald Trump wakes up Tuesday morning and goes on an unhinged rant and cancels the meeting. Why? Because he doesn't want to discuss the Republican health care crisis, and they've decided to shut the government down. And on top of all of that, Mike Johnson cancels votes that we were scheduled to have next Tuesday and next Monday in immediate advancement of a possible government shutdown, decides that there's no need for us to be in town. I mean, that's all outrageous, and it points to one thing. Republicans have decided to shut the government down.
What do you think got to the president?
When was the last time that you spoke to Speaker Johnson about the shutdown mission?
We spoke briefly last week about the logistics around the government funding vote, but had no discussion about substance.
U.S. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat of New York, news conference today in Washington. Polymarket, a cryptocurrency-based site headquartered in New York City that it says offers a platform where individuals can place bets on various future events, including economic indicators, weather patterns, awards, as well as political and legislative outcomes, puts the odds of a U.S. government shutdown this year at 75%. Wall Street today, the Dow down 171, NASDAQ down 75, S&P down 18. Democrat Adelita Grijalva easily won the Arizona 7th Congressional District special election on Tuesday. She'll be taking the seat of her late father, former Congressman Raul Grijalva, a Democrat who died in office this year. She spoke about him during her victory speech in South Tucson.
This campaign was never about me or any one person. It wasn't about my last name either. A last name alone doesn't earn you the trust from the community, service does. And my dad's legacy is one of service to Southern Arizona. He literally fought until his last breath for this community. He served more than 50 years, and he was the most progressive member of Congress, full stop. I am proud to stand on my dad's shoulders. My parents raised some strong, opinionated, and smart daughters, and I, with full chest, say I am so proud to be Raul and Ramona Grijalva's daughter.
Adelita Grijalva, now a representative-elect, heading off to Congress after winning the special election in Arizona's 7th Congressional District on Tuesday. Also, during her victory speech, she talked about the agenda she plans to pursue.
We are living in unprecedented times. There is no doubt about that. Trump is going after the values we hold dearly as Americans: equality under the law, due process, and freedom of speech. Thus far, Congress has acted as his rubber stamp, abdicating their constitutional responsibility as a co-equal branch of government. But the voters of Southern Arizona just sent the rest of the country a loud message. We reject the MAGA agenda, and we will hold this administration accountable. That is why, on my very first day in office, I will be the decisive 218 signature on the discharge petition to force a vote on the release of the Epstein files. And I will begin my work to immediately push legislation that reflects the priorities of this district: advancing environmental justice for all and respecting tribal sovereignty, lowering costs for working people by repealing Trump's unilateral authority to impose tariffs that are driving up costs on everything, reversing cuts to Medicaid and SNAP, and protecting the social safety nets that our children and our seniors rely on. Defending public education by restoring federal funding and fighting attempts to expand private voucher schemes. Standing up for our immigrant communities against Trump's illegal ICE raids that are ripping families apart.
Congresswoman-elect Adelita Grijalva, Democrat from Arizona, Tuesday night in South Tucson after winning the special election to fill the seat of her late father. She got nearly 70% of the vote. And when she's sworn in, there will be 433 voting members of Congress, 219 Republicans, 214 Democrats, and 2 vacancies. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Coming up live Thursday on C-SPAN Radio at 1 p.m. Eastern, the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation hosts a panel on the Supreme Court and democracy, featuring Representatives Hank Johnson of Georgia and Wesley Bell of Missouri. Then at 3:45 p.m. Eastern, former National Economic Council Chair Lael Brainerd speaks at Georgetown on today's economic risks and uncertainties. And at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, also from Georgetown, a conversation with Paul Atkins, chairman of the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. Those events are all live tomorrow on C-SPAN Radio. For the full schedule, visit cspan.org or follow us on X at C-SPAN Radio. And don't forget, you can listen on your smart speaker. Just say play C-SPAN Radio.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. From Reuters, Ben Carson, a former U.S. Housing Secretary and retired neurosurgeon, was sworn in on Wednesday as a National Advisor on Nutrition, Health, and Housing at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the agency said. Carson, who served as Housing and Urban Development Secretary during President Donald Trump's first term, will advise Trump and Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins and join Rollins in the activities of the administration's Make America Healthy Again Commission. USDA said in a statement Trump has charged the MAHA Commission with addressing childhood chronic disease. That was all from Reuters. Both Ben Carson and Secretary Rollins spoke to reporters outside the White House.
Dr. Carson's joining this administration, President Trump's vision on making America healthy again. We just swore in a couple hours ago. Dr. Carson's going to be our National Nutrition Advisor. So as we continue the work to make America healthy again and the intersection of agriculture and HHS with Secretary Kennedy, as we were talking and we partnered together for a long time, last administration and even before, it really occurred to us that there's no greater American who has lived the American dream in just such a remarkable way than Ben Carson. So for me personally, it's a really banner day, an exciting day. I know for President Trump, it certainly is. But I think the people who will benefit the most and perhaps be the most excited when they understand what this means are the American people, but especially maybe our most vulnerable in America, as you're going to fight for the right food, nutrition, et cetera, for that population.
Well, so many people who are in the lower socioeconomic groups do not get good nutrition. We're going to expand the things that are shelved, that are kept in the stores, that are healthy foods. And we're going to really try to look at food from its inception, from the time it is planted, how the soil is treated, by the time it is harvested, how it gets to the stores, how it gets to the home, what happens to it in between. Because we want the things that happen to it in between to be good things, not things that add to the devaluation of our foods. And that's going to make a big difference for our health. We look at many other industrialized countries, and their life expectancy is still going up. Our life expectancy is coming down. We need to correct that, and I think it has a lot to do with what we eat.
Ben Carson, the new National Nutrition Advisor outside the White House with the Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins. He's a former Housing and Urban Development Secretary in the first Trump administration, also former Republican presidential candidate. Politico writing about this, Carson will step into the new role as USDA takes a more active role in the MAHA movement. The department has authorized state-level initiatives to bar participants in the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program from using their benefits to buy junk food. It will also be responsible for updating the dietary guidelines for Americans due this year, a crucial way for federal officials to influence consumers' perceptions of what a healthy diet looks like. That was from Politico. From the Washington Post, the family of one of the people who died in the fatal collision of an American Airlines regional jet and an Army Black Hawk helicopter near Washington are suing the carrier and its subsidiary PSA Airlines, alleging the parties failed to implement policies and procedures that could have prevented the crash. Also named in the suit are the Federal Aviation Administration and the U.S. Army. From the Washington Post reporting, lawyer for the family Bob Clifford, representing the victim Casey Crofton, spoke at a news conference at the National Press Club in Washington.
We sued American Airlines and PSA because they are the common carrier that was entrusted with the responsibility to provide the care and safety at the highest degree possible for the traveling public. A common carrier has a duty. It's not just a duty to avoid negligence. Operators of a motor vehicle can't run through a red light. Operators of a commercial aircraft cannot run through yellow lights. And they ran blatantly for years, many red lights here, by allowing these planes to operate in the navigable space at DCA, knowing that there was massive congestion, that there was a massive intersection between military traffic regarding runways that were unique and required special training that they failed to provide to their pilots. The complaint against American is set out in a way that emphasizes their responsibility. All of you are familiar, of course, with the recent hearings that were conducted here in Washington by the NTSB investigating this crash. That investigation is focused on the probable cause of what happened that day. But that investigation is not as wide in scope as is necessary for the families to fully understand what American knew, when they knew it, and what they could have done to prevent it. And it is known that American had the ability, because of their notice of near misses, a massive number of near misses, that they nevertheless allowed their customers to be exposed to the dangers associated with those near misses, even though they sought additional gates, they sought additional landings and takeoffs, and they did everything possible to maximize their ability to shuttle passengers in and out of that airport. So there is that focus in the complaint on the fact that there's a corporate negligence and accountability that existed for a long time before that fateful night. Then the complaint does complain about and focuses on the conduct of the pilots that evening. And I know it's tough for some people to hear, but I assure you that all the lawyers associated with this case have consulted with experts of the highest caliber, integrity, and credibility who do in fact have things to say about the performance of the pilots that night that could have prevented this disaster. Whether it was associated between accepting the runway that they used, or it was associated with the 19 seconds that they had to respond to the alerts about traffic that, to the best of our knowledge from the record, were not responded to at all, and that, we believe, is a responsibility that they had that night. And I say that with all due respect to the fact that those people lost their lives as well. But had the Army done what it was supposed to do, had the FAA done what it was supposed to do, none of this would happen. And that's where, if you look in the body of the complaint, we turn to the FAA. And we talk about the fact that the FAA allowed this environment to exist, knowing that there was massive congestion and these number of near misses. We turn to the FAA and their responsibility to properly provide air traffic control that was not fully provided and properly provided on that evening.
Lawyer Bob Clifford at the National Press Club today, talking about the lawsuit filed in the crash from last January near Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport between American Eagle Flight 5342 and an Army Black Hawk helicopter. The lawsuit on behalf of the family of one of the passengers who died on the plane, Casey Crafton. The Washington Post, writing about this, has a statement from American Airlines saying it has a strong track record of putting safety above everything else. As the recent NTSB investigative hearing showed, Flight 5342 was on a routine approach to DCA when the Army helicopter that was above the published helicopter route altitude collided with it. We continue to support the ongoing NTSB investigation and will defend American and PSA Airlines against any legal action claiming the airline caused or contributed to this incident. NASA is returning astronauts to the moon for the first time in 50 years. The launch is set for no later than April 2026, but if plans go right, they might take off sooner. It's called Artemis 2. The mission would last 10 days and fly 4 astronauts around the moon on NASA's Orion spacecraft. According to Space.com, the NASA Acting Deputy Associate Administrator for Exploration Systems Development, Lakeisha Hawkins, says, "We together have a front row seat to history." At a news conference today at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, astronauts Victor Glover, Christina Koch, Jeremy Hansen, and Reed Wiseman were asked about their mission compared to the Apollo moon mission years ago.
Hi, everybody. Tom Costello with NBC News. Nice to see you all yet again. You are sitting there on the same stage that the Apollo astronauts stood and sat as they prepared for their mission to the moon. And I'm wondering now, as you fast forward from that experience from Apollo 11 and the other Apollo missions, what is in your minds as you share that legacy, that mission, and really what similar goals do you have from what the Apollo missions did and what you're looking to do?
Can I just at least start? I'll answer too, but I guess I have a request. I would love it if we could all say something to this one. And I'll keep mine short. There's a lot of talk about races, but when you bring up Apollo, the thing that legacy, it just resonates through everything that we're doing. And the race that I think the most about is the relay race that we're in. There's a saying: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And we are going together. And our mission success is built on handing off a starting point to Artemis 3 that sets our country and our partners up to go back to the surface of the moon. And so I just think about legacy and the honor and privilege it is to be a part of this journey.
Thank you for that question and for Eric's earlier. Legacy is something that we think about a lot as a crew, especially when we are going through this developmental mission training, which is so undefined in so many ways. We are constantly asking ourselves the question you asked earlier of not only when are we ready, but how do we get ready? How much do we deep dive each thing? How much do we let the team handle? What decisions do we make ourselves? What decisions do we pass off? And not having a book for what to know, what to do, what's right. Writing that book as we go is a challenge. And sometimes when that challenge gets too confusing, I sit back and think about legacy. What do we want this legacy to be? And that is a guiding light for how we approach this mission. And I do think about those Apollo astronauts. We've seen them many times in those press conferences. We've read their books. And they were really mission focused. They went through the training that the team put before them. They worked with the teams. They stayed up late. They studied because they cared about giving the most back that they possibly could. And that is what we share with them that I'm so proud and honored to share. And another thought that comes to mind is about how NASA is so revered for that history. And I also want it to be revered for its future, for the future that we are bringing to humanity in doing this mission.
I will answer only because Victor asked me to, because I think you two covered that beautifully. But I'll add one more thing that kind of came to mind when I heard that question. Apollo 8, when they flew around the moon just before Christmas in 1968, there was a lot going on in the world, and people realized it was a really tough time. People were struggling in many different ways. And I think we can all resonate with that today. And I remember reading about a postcard that Bill Anders got when he got back. And it just simply said, all that was written on it was, "You saved 1968.
Well, now I have to follow your lead. That was an excellent answer as well. I want to bridge. This is going to be an odd answer. It might land wrong, but I'm going to try anyway. This is the first time we're going to send humans to the moon, and we're going to have humans in low Earth orbit. That is awesome. Like, we should, as humanity, we should take a brief moment to go, that's awesome. One of the things that we most asked for and look forward to is we are going to do a crew conference between Integrity and the International Space Station, the crew that's up there. And I will tell you, our friends that are on Crew 11 and our friends that are getting ready to launch on Crew 12 are arm wrestling between the station and home to see who gets to be in space when they talk. Like, they're as fired up as we are, and I did not expect that. But we are kind of talking about legacy here. And, when we started this 2.5 years ago, we did a lot of this, like, big, huge strategic thinking, huge inspiration. The last 6 months, it's totally changed. We are thinking about, how does this computer talk to this computer? How do these abort systems work when we're over the Atlantic Ocean, over Africa, over the Indian Ocean? We are thinking a completely different set of thoughts, and that is awesome. And when I look at the future, when we talk about what is our legacy, I don't want to look 5 years or 10 years in the future. I want to look 100 or 200 years in the future. And honestly, this is where I thought this might land wrong. I hope we're forgotten. 100%. If we are forgotten, then Artemis has been successful. We have humans on Mars. We have humans out on the moons of Saturn. We are expanding in the solar system. We have robotic precursor missions going out. We already have spacecraft outside of our solar system. Maybe we've invented something that we never even dreamed of, and maybe we inspired some kid somewhere, and maybe that's our footnote. We inspired Susie or Johnny to do what they did. That would be magical.
Artemis 2 mission astronauts Victor Glover, Christina Koch, Jeremy Hansen, and Reed Wiseman at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. Artemis 1 was in 2024. That was uncrewed, going to the moon and back. Artemis 2 will be crewed, flying around the moon. It was supposed to happen this year, but was pushed to 2026 after Artemis 1's heat shield had more damage than expected. Artemis 3, that's putting humans back on the surface of the moon, that's scheduled now for 2027. This is Washington Today. BBC News writes, as the United Nations headed into the second day of its General Assembly, Donald Trump's comments yesterday that Kyiv can win all of Ukraine back in its original form hung over proceedings. During his address, Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky renewed his warnings over Russia's aggression. Vladimir Putin will keep driving the war forward, he said, telling them stopping him now is cheaper. Reeling from a recent Russian incursion into its airspace, the president of Estonia echoed Zelensky's warnings, urging for more collaborative action to stop a Kremlin willing to inflict destruction. That was from BBC News. Here's a portion of President Zelensky at the UN General Assembly.
Today, no one but ourselves can guarantee security. Only strong alliances, only strong partners, and only our own weapons. The 21st century isn't much different from the past. If a nation wants peace, it still has to work on weapons. It's sick. But that's the reality. Not international law, not cooperation. Weapons decide who survives. Excellencies, you know perfectly well international law doesn't work fully unless you have powerful friends who are truly willing to stand up for it. And even that doesn't work without weapons. It's terrible, but without it, things would be even worse. There are no security guarantees except friends and weapons. No Ukrainian choice this kind of reality. And knowing our people, they would have chosen a different priority. Ukrainians are peaceful people, but they are people who want to live freely in their own independent country. That's why we invest in defense. For many nations, there is simply no other way left. Nations can speak about their pain from stages like this, but even during bloodshed, there isn't a single international institution that can truly stop it. That's how weak these institutions have become. What can Sudan or Somalia or Palestine or any other people living through war really expect from the UN or the global system? For decades, just statements and statements.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky speaking to the United Nations General Assembly in New York City. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov met on Wednesday, writes ABC News, one day after President Donald Trump called Moscow a paper tiger and said Ukraine could win back its seized land. A spokesperson for Rubio released a short statement after the meeting, only saying that Rubio reiterated President Trump's call for the killing to stop and the need for Moscow to take a meaningful step toward a durable resolution of the Russia-Ukraine war. And Al Jazeera reporting that the Kremlin has announced it has no alternative but to continue waging war as it pushed back on U.S. President Donald Trump's sudden sea change toward Ukraine that saw him brand Russia a paper tiger. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov hit back at Trump's claim that Ukraine could in effect win the war, declaring on Wednesday that Russia would be continuing its offensive on Ukraine to ensure our interests and achieve our goals. That was from Al Jazeera. Iran's President Mahmoud Pezeshkian told the UN General Assembly today that it has no interest in developing a nuclear weapon.
I hereby declare once more before this assembly that Iran has never sought and will never seek to build a nuclear bomb. we do not seek nuclear weapons. This is our belief based on the edict issued by the Supreme Leader and by religious authorities. Therefore, we never sought weapons of mass destruction, nor will we ever seek them.
Iran's president before the UN General Assembly. Reuters writes that this comes just days before international sanctions could be reimposed on his country over Tehran's nuclear ambitions. On August 28th, Britain, France, and Germany launched a 30-day process to reimpose UN sanctions that ends on September 27th, accusing Tehran of failing to abide by a 2015 deal with world powers aimed at preventing it from developing a nuclear weapon. European powers have offered to delay reinstating sanctions for up to 6 months to allow space for talks on a long-term deal if Iran restores access to UN nuclear inspectors, addresses concerns about its stock and enriched uranium, and engages in talks with the U.S. That was all from Reuters. More from the Iranian president's speech at the UN today as he talked about Iran's role in the international community.
But we envision our powerful Iran alongside powerful neighbors within a strong region with a radiant future. A future in which we stand together against a grand project that imposes genocide, destruction, and instability upon the region. A future in which collective security is assured through genuine mechanisms of defensive cooperation and joint response to threats. A future in which human dignity and cultural diversity are cherished as foundational values. A future in which collective development is realized through joint investment in infrastructure and modern sciences. A future in which energy security and the equitable use of vital resources from the pillars of economic stability. A future in which the environment is safeguarded for posterity. A future in which national sovereignty and the territorial integrity of states are regarded as non-negotiable principles, a future not in pursuit of peace imposed by force, but founded upon strength derived through peace. In such a strong region, slaughter and bloodshed shall find no place. It is for this very reason that my country has, for many years, been among the staunchest advocates of establishing a region free of weapons of mass destruction. Yet those who themselves possess the largest nuclear arsenals and who in flagrant breach of the NPT make their weapons even deadlier and more destructive have for years subjected our people to pressures on the basis of spurious allegations.
Iran's president, through an interpreter, Mahmoud Pezeshkian, at the UN General Assembly this first week of the opening of the 80th session of the General Assembly, and leaders of many countries giving speeches. We've been covering many of them on the C-SPAN networks. Find the video at cspan.org. And thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word. Get the stories making headlines in Washington sent to your inbox every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.